Madden 24 is just a little over a week away and we've got more information rolling in. EA's been dropping a lot of information, but one thing they haven't put out yet are the 50 X Factor players, and people have been asking who are going to be the X Factor players this year. Now in the past, EA would put out this list pretty early, but the past couple of years, they have not put it out too early or even at all. However, each year Madden School has somehow obtained the early X Factor player list and they post it on their site. And every year they've been accurate, so I'm just assuming that once again Madden School is accurate because they have been in the past, and we're gonna go over what appears to be the top 50 X Factor players for Madden 24. Keep in mind it's not 100% official, so a name or two maybe could be off, but again, judging from the past, they've usually been pretty accurate. And another reason I think it's accurate is because in the gameplay clips we've seen from some of the trailers, most of the people in the clips that have X Factor and Superstar is accurate to what is listed on the site as well. Starting with the quarterbacks, and we're just gonna list them by X Factor ability and group them together that way. So we have Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes with the bazooka ability. We've got Lamar Jackson with the Truz ability, and we've got Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts with the run and gun ability. So Jalen Hurts, it appears, is getting upgraded to an X Factor player to start Madden 24. And I know Eagles fans are gonna be hyped about that because honestly, he probably should have been upgraded to an X Factor at the end of last year. Now, one guy you could say maybe was snubbed was Justin Herbert. I think he'll get X Factor eventually. It's kind of surprising that he hasn't gotten it yet. And Dak Prescott, who was an X Factor last year, is not going to be one to start this year, so that's a switch up. Now let's talk about the running backs. Of course, we've got Derrick Henry with Freight Train, Christian McCaffrey with Ankle Breaker, and then we've got Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, and Austin Eckler with Wrecking Ball. So Austin Eckler finally getting that X Factor nod after a crazy season. And then we've got Saquon Barkley with First One Free. Now let's talk about the wide receivers. We've got Justin Jefferson, of course, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, and DK Metcalf, all with the Double Me X Factor. Then we've got Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, and Cooper Kupp with the Rack 'em Up X Factor. AJ Brown and Keenan Allen have Max Security. Terry McLaurin has Ankle Breaker, and Deebo Samuel has Yak 'em Up. Now, looking at this list, this looks like the same guys that ended last year with X Factors, unless I'm forgetting somebody, but it doesn't appear that we have any new wide receiver X Factors to start Madden 24. Now with wide receivers, you can always argue that there's some guys being snubbed, guys like Tyler Lockett. You can even argue guys like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb should have X Factors. The one that still surprises me is Keenan Allen. You know, he's been battling some injuries, and I just don't know if I would consider him a top 50 player at this point. He's still really good, but there's some other receivers I would for sure rather see with X Factor over him at this point. Now, really quickly, I did want to mention that we are once again sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. They've been a huge supporter of the channel, and if you like fantasy sports or you like doing a little bit of the sports betting like me, they have a fun pick'em game where you can pick a couple player props, put them together, and if they hit, you can win some big money. Now, if you sign up and use my code RAY, they'll actually double your first deposit up to $100. So you can get $100 free to play around with. So it's such a good deal, you might as well try it out if it's something you're into. Next up, we've got the tight ends, and as usual, it's only going to be the same three names that we've kind of grown accustomed to. It's Travis Kelce with Double Me, and then George Kittle and Mark Andrews with Yak 'em Up. Now, they also have Kyle Pitts listed as an X Factor with Double Me as well, but for some reason, I don't think this one's accurate, and that's only because he didn't have an X Factor worthy season. He wasn't an X Factor at any point last year, and he only had 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, which would be unprecedented for getting an X Factor in Madden. So I'm just gonna kind of make an educated guess here and say what probably happened was we're probably looking at one of two other guys that has an X Factor. It's either probably Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins, potentially, because both of them were free agents, and Dalvin Cook is still a free agent, by the way, but he's gonna sign soon. But both of them were free agents recently, and if you remember when they dropped the ratings, neither of them are listed in the ratings database on EA's website. DeAndre Hopkins now is because he just signed, but Dalvin Cook still isn't in the database, but we do know he's a 91 overall because EA put that part on Twitter. So I think what might have happened was when Madden School got this list, they probably got a list of 49 players instead of 50. And obviously we know there has to be a 50th player, and they probably put Kyle Pitts in there because technically in the beta, Kyle Pitts for some reason did have an X Factor in the beta. The entire X Factor list wasn't updated, but there were a couple players that had X Factor that didn't have it in Madden 23, and Kyle Pitts was one of them. So I'm thinking they probably needed a 50th guy and put Kyle Pitts in here. But but it's probably more likely to be somebody like Dalvin Cook or DeAndre Hopkins, and they just weren't listed on the X Factor list because they did it by teams. That's how it's broken down on the website. So they probably got a list from somebody by teams, and since a couple of guys are free agents, they probably weren't on the list. Another reason I feel like he's not an X Factor is because he's in some of the gameplay clips in the early trailers, and he only has a superstar ability there as well. So again, this is really just me making an educated guess, but I just can't really see a world where Kyle Pitts would go from not having an X Factor to being an X Factor player in a season that was not very good from him. So we'll see when it comes out, but the rest of the list definitely looks spot on and makes sense. Now, hey, if you're still here at this point of the video and you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing and joining the family. I mean, you're pretty much already a part of the family anyway if you're still hanging out at this point of the video. I'm trying to hit 1 million subs one day. I need your help, and I would greatly appreciate it. Moving on to the defensive line, these are going to be the interior guys and the edge rushers. We have Aaron Donald and Dexter Lawrence with Blitz, Nick Bosa and Max Crosby with Relentless, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa, Micah Parsons, and DeForest Buckner with Unstoppable Force, Von Miller and Cam Hayward with Fearmonger, and then we've got Chris Jones and Jonathan Allen with Momentum Shift. For the linebackers, we have Fred Warner with Zone Hawk, Demario Davis and Roquan Smith with Reinforcement, and then we've got Levante David, still at his old age. He's still an X Factor. He's still really good. He's got Run Stuffer. Now, on the D-line and the linebackers that we went over, I don't see any new names for Madden 24. All the guys that have these X Factors had them at the end of Madden 23, so we don't have any new call-ups there. Moving on to the cornerbacks, we've got Jalen Ramsey with Bottleneck, Jair Alexander, Patrick Surtain, Darius Slay, and Tre'Davious White all with Shutdown. So Patrick Surtain is a new upgrade for this year, and I think he should be. He's absolutely amazing. I'm very surprised to still see Tre'Davious White with Shutdown. Obviously, he was hurt last year, so maybe they're cutting him some slack, because obviously his first few years in the league, he's been very consistently good, but the cornerback list feels like one that's kind of light. It feels like there's a couple other guys that should be here, like maybe Marlon Humphrey. He's the 4th rated cornerback in the game this year, and he's not an X Factor, so that seems a little weird. You've also got Sauce Gardner, who's tied for the 4th highest cornerback in the game as well, who doesn't have an X Factor. Now, obviously, with him only playing 1 year, it could make sense why they wouldn't just give him an X Factor right away. Like, they made Jamar Chase wait and stuff like that as well. But if you've already got him rated as a top 5 cornerback, then clearly you think he's that good, so I don't think he should have to wait to get that. In my opinion, looking at this list, after Tre'Davious White kind of had a lackluster year and was hurt, I would have maybe given the nod to Sauce or Marlon Humphrey over him. However, again, there is potential that not every single thing on this list is accurate, but again, going off the past, it has been accurate, so I'm just assuming that it is once again. And lastly, at safety, we've got one, and it's Derwin James with Reinforcement. The safety list also looks pretty light. Normally, we'd have like 3 or 4 guys, so you've got no Tyrann Mathieu here, you've got no Kevin Byard, no Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's the 2nd highest safety in the game. I think it was probably time to give Minkah that X Factor nod. So there's obviously a few names on the list that you're going to feel like got snubbed, but again, when it's only 50 players, does make it a little difficult to narrow it down, but I think Minkah should have probably been one. I think we could have seen a couple other cornerbacks get it as well. I'd be more in favor of some of the older players like a Levante David, for example. Again, don't get me wrong, he's still really good, but I would say some of the older players, I'd be okay with them like not having the X Factor anymore, in favor of some of the younger and really dominant players that we have right now. But again, it's EA, they're gonna mix it up throughout the year a couple times, they're gonna do some updates, but this appears to be the 50 X Factors we're gonna have to start Madden 24. Now, if you want to know more about Madden 24's gameplay, here are 5 big things that were addressed and will no longer be overpowered in Madden 24.